Hi, I'm Mike Brauer. These have been part of my career for many, many, many years. And they're now belong to Alto. And like anything, there's transitions. I remember when I was first deciding that mixing to half-inch tape was just too inefficient because of the recalls and all the other things that were going on at the time. And I thought, okay, well, how can I still get that sound? And since I'd grown up hearing tape, I was able to just continue mixing and just know that that's the sound. And I would make little changes because now it wasn't going to tape. So I had to make that sound before going to tape. That transition worked out fine. Then, and of course, going to Pro Tools from 24 track or 48 track, learning that sound. It went from beautiful, lush, full bandwidth to a situation now where when Pro Tools first came out, there was a ceiling on the sound. It wasn't big and beautiful and rich. And now, of course, there's no limitations. The sound is fantastic. And of course, same thing with the GUIs, you know, the software, the plugin, it would look like a Pultec, but it didn't sound like a Pultec. And you know, so I didn't want to use any of those in the beginning. It was strictly, I've got my analog gear, I'll use Pro Tools as a tape machine. And now, well, then I was at Electric Lady for many years. And then after 9 or 10 years, when I made my move, I decided that analog desk was just not the way to go, that I really needed to find something to replace that desk and go with a control surface. So of course I did it very, very slow. Very slow. I mean, I spent almost 2 years learning how to find my sweet spot without the analog desk. And it took a lot of patience on my assistants with me and learning how to set up a new template. But in time, because I was still working on my analog desk, I could always go back to my SSL and be happy and not worry. And then slowly I learned the hybrid. And I thought, okay, well, that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to stay hybrid. I've replaced the desk. It actually sounds even better now. It sounds great to me because my whole approach with the ABCD is that sound is happening before the desk. So once I removed the desk, I still had my sound. And the sound of the SSL, I was able to get by putting in SSL plugins. I thought, well, that's it. I mean, I'll never go to in the box. But in the meantime, I was still learning, just in case, how to be in the box. And we slowly set up my whole template, the whole Brauer thing in the template slowly. And I didn't take it very seriously, just like I didn't take going hybrid very seriously in the beginning. And then, you know, but over the past couple of years, I mean, I've been using it, but, you know, not really tweaking it. It would sound okay. Then the pandemic hit, and I was forced to really consider doing what? Stop working at all or move some of the rig up to my house. And that's what I chose. So I took everything that had to do with just being able to mix in the box, and I took it up to the house. And after 2.5 months, I'd been tweaking to the point I'm like, wow, this sounds really good. At the end of the day, it's about the pilot. It's about the person flying the plane. You know, it's not always about the gear. Gear helps. Good gear helps. But, you know, here I am. I was at a crossroads that I was thinking, what am I doing? I have, you know, 5 tons of gear, and I'm attached to it. And if I want to go to another place, it's there. And I was like, do I need it anymore? I mean, I've been mixing for 2.5 months, and I'm hearing no complaints from artists and clients and producers. So I was like, maybe this is the time. Maybe, you know, pandemic, the silver lining to really think about changes. And every change has to be better. There's no compromising. There never has been compromising. I never even considered any hybrid till the day, and nothing came out that was, you know, it was just playing around and testing, you know, free mixes and stuff. The day that I thought, wow, this is not only good, but this could even be better, that's when I made the change. And over the past 2.5 months, I came to that same conclusion. So, fortunately, I have a great friend, John Haber from Alto, who had purchased a lot of my gear when I moved from Electric Lady to the place in Chelsea, and it was like a doubling up of a lot of gear. He got it all, and then I said to him one day, I called him, I said, John, I'm telling you, I don't know how to say this, but I'm really happy with the way I am. And then I called a few friends of mine that have been in the box for years, like Dave Siddick and Andrew Sheps and, you know, Nico Bolas and you know, I was running it by them, and they said, no, just go for it. It'll be okay. And so here we are. I ended up with just one rack, actually 2 racks. One rack is for, you know, all the print rig with my computer and my Antelope and, you know, all this stuff just for printing. And then the second one is the one I'm holding on to with the anchors. The Awa Green, there's only one of. The Awa Gray that was modified. The Presto, the Federal that was, you know, basically the trigger for so many other people wanting the Federals, but this one is so modified. It's an unbelievable sound. So I've kept some of that. I've kept a couple of the reverbs that have my special patches that I used to use on Coldplay and stuff. So I'm going to hold on to those for a while longer and still, you know, use that for vocal sounds or other things like that. But I'm going to print them right away. It's not, you know, it's not going to be any more of having to take an hour and a half. What used to be 3 hours to do all the stems got cut down to an hour and a half, and now it's going to be hit a button. So here we are. So there's a lot of history behind me. So let's get started. This is a very interesting rack. This is actually my ABCD rack, my multi-bus rack. And we'll start with A. This was the first piece of gear that I acquired. This is a 33609. That was the first one. And it was later modified to improve the sound by, I think I had Alan Smart go in there and work it so that there's more transformers, or there's something in there that made it even more lush. But this one is so special because this is the one with the steel. Now, I mean, again, this was the first generation, and it's, I've never heard anything else like it. It's just really just, it's just a sweet, rich, silky sound. It's really beautiful. And I'll show you on the back, but out of these, this is how I first mixed for my first 10 years before things changed and I had to kind of come up with a different approach, a much more complicated one that one likes to call wacky. And those would be the Pultecs. So I have 2 Pultecs in the back that are in pristine condition. And one of them I think has media sound still etched on it. And those were, all of these racks you can see were built by Vince Gutman of Mark Audio. And he built and wired all of these. It's unbelievable work. And which means that it was in such great condition that I've never had any problems with them. And I've shipped these over to Europe back when people liked to do that. But the Pultecs in the back are unbelievable. They also, the sockets were replaced with ceramic, heat-resistant ceramic sockets so that the tubes go in and there isn't overheating or anything. And the tubes themselves are Telefunken platinum matched, crazy good. Then we go to B. These are the two distressors. When I first heard these, I don't think there were many at all in New York, and I was like, this is it. I mean, after many, many years, there had been nothing that had come out until these distressors, right? You had the LA3As, the LA2As, 1176s, you know, if you could get hold of a Roger Mayer, which I still have, and, you know, and then the 670s, but our studio didn't have 670s. Most of the studios in England and a few others, but that was a real luxury. And then the distressor comes out, and it was a musician's compressor. It was a real mixer's compressor. And I loved it. And I called him up. I go, hey, I'm Michael, you know, can I meet you? And he goes, oh, yeah, okay. I said, where do you live? He gave me the address. And I got my car and I drove and we talked. And we just got to be really good friends. And of course, I've been playing with him for a while. And I said, you know what'd be really cool, man? You know, like on 1176s, when you put all the buttons in, they call it the British mode. I learned that from some British engineers bringing that in, you know, and I thought that was so cool. You think you could do that? Well, eventually he did that. And these are the ones right here. Well, no, that's a stereo. That's the British mode right here. So you pop these in. So I think the serial numbers here have to be super, super low because they were like, you know, the originals. And then I think there's two more. There's two more here. And this one's got the mod and this one doesn't, because this one I think was a spare. This one I used to use on nuke, the nuke, total nuke position for part of my vocal sound. And then of course I got the Fatso from him. Once I haven't moved these from this position since I got this, my overhead cymbal sound. Once I got this, I never touched them. Same thing with most of this gear. Once I found its sweet spot, like this would have been, you know, B for across my drums. I've never touched them since I found that sweet spot. And out of there, it goes into these Avalons. Now the story on these Avalons is, it was one of the first year that Win started making the EQs, and he had a tiny little booth, you know, and I'm walking, you know how you walk up and down aisles, you're looking for something cool. I mean, it's got to look cool, and of course it's got to sound cool. And I'm walking, and then I come by him and I see this, and it's the light when these are lit. It's just the light that's behind these meters is just this beautiful, warm, inviting color. And I go, whoa, what is this? You know, so we started talking, and you know, I put the headphones on and you listen to the EQs, and I'm like, whoa, this is so clean. He goes, yeah, Class A. I go, yeah, you know, and then I was messing around a little bit with the EQs. I'm like, oh man, that gain, that's like, yeah, for me, I can hear that. That's a little too much. So what he did was, when the button is in, they're all actually half of what this gain is. You pop it out, it's the regular amount. So these, I'm the only one that he did this for. So each one of these, you can really fine tune the gain on any of these EQs. And then these two, I would keep sending it to him, and I go, hey, these are good. I think at the time he had feed forward, maybe compression on these, and I was like, can I have some feedback compression on that? You know, which is more of, I can't remember now. One of them is more limiting, one of them is less. It's been so long. I don't care. I like, oh yeah, this is a sound. I don't remember technically, but you know, so he added the feed forward and feedback. Then I said, yeah, you know, can you maybe put some side chaining in there? And so he put some of that. I mean, every other month I'd send these back to him and he'd do something else to them. So again, this is one of only. That's it. There's no, and I had them all, the whole thing refurbished maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so most of these are all dead by now. It's not even worth dying because all the caps are gone, and there's only one person who would calibrate this, and that would be Win. I think there is one person that he has in the tech, but he personally got these all working for me again. This is interesting. This, I got this. Right now, there's an option for it to be either balanced or unbalanced. And when I first had them, they were in an unbalanced position. And this was part of my acoustic guitar sound would be these two going into this. And just that alone, you'll hear a lot of the acoustic guitar sounds you heard maybe on the Coldplay or I don't know, the Mayor, or so many records. I mean, that acoustic guitar was always these guys going into this. I had the ceiling like set at 12 o'clock, and I had the compress and limiting in, and the whole thing is just gain just right. And so this going into this, it sounded good. And then when I moved to Sony Studios, I had him put this wasn't in a rack yet. I had him put it in a rack. And Vincent said, well, you know, because it's a long line, long cable, what I'll do is I'll make it balanced so there's less noise. I said, okay, cool. What do I know? What do I care, right? As soon as I started mixing first record, I was like, what happened to my acoustic guitar sound? What happened to the air on it? He goes, well, nothing. And I go, something has happened. What did you do differently? He goes, the only thing I did was I made it balanced. I go, okay, let's undo that. Let's undo that right away. So these are now back to being unbalanced, and the sound that Paul Wolf, who designed this, is just, it's an air. You get a good sound and you haven't even done anything yet, you know. You just turn it on, and then, you know, if you want to EQ, you can, but a lot of the times none of that is necessary. So that's always been my acoustic guitar sound. This Moog, that used to be my bass sound for years. You put something in here. This is an old, you know, 3-band parametric, and the studio I got it from, obviously there was a lot of smoking, because look at this, it's not that nice white, it's almost like yellow, right? But I had it completely cleaned out. There is no nicotine on anything in there. And this was, and you'll see the little markings on here, and that was my bass sound for years. This retro, in my second room, as I was trying to learn how to do a hybrid, how to mix without the console, I had to replicate my ABCD. And so the Pultecs, which sounded so great, I ended up going with these, which sound so good that once I had a tube go bad or something on my Pultecs, I threw these in, you know, because I had to do it in minutes because it was in the middle of a mix. You could barely hear any difference. Really, really impressive. Once again, you got to put in good tubes, you got to keep it clean, the usual stuff. But we lined it up and it was perfect. And then we go to, well, this would be C. This was my guitar sound. It used to be Joe Meek. I had it for years. It was kind of like the original. This is a cousin of the Joe Meek. Joe Meek was my guitar sound. It was like that green, you know, with 1 meter, and it was 1.A or something that a friend who was, you know, fellow engineer had recommended that I use for my guitar sound. And the great thing about that is it sounded like nothing until you started to compress at a certain point, and then it woke up. It just started to shimmer. It was an incredible guitar sound. I was like, wow. And so I used that forever. And then until one day I'm walking down the aisle, you know, at AES, and I'm like, I'm just looking for something new. And I have in my mind that I'd like something a bit more exciting on my C bus, where I put all my guitars and acoustic. And I'm walking along, and first year, Greg has got Pendulum, you know, and I'm like, huh, what's this? And of course, you know, to be attracted to something, first it's got to look good, right? And then what's behind the look? You know, is there depth? Is there sound? Is there excitement? And you know, so there's always that first, the visual, and then followed by, you know, is it all that it's cracked up to be? And he had 3 or 4 different ones. He had this one, and he had one that's more like, has a 670 tubes in it, and then he had something else, and I don't know. You know, I'm like, yeah, you know, so I'm listening in the headphones that, you know, he's providing, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know, yeah. Say what? It's like, bring up the volume just a little bit more, and it starts to get into that sweet spot, and it starts to shimmer, and I'm like, oh, that's my new guitar sound. That's going to be bus C now. And I bought it immediately. And then I bought a second one. When I had to start the second room, I had to emulate it. And so it is probably on the back somewhere. Oh, no, here it is. Here's the second one. This is the last one that Greg built. Literally the last one. He had stopped making them, and he had parts, and so I go, Greg, please, I need a second one. And so he built this one. So this is the last one. This is one of the first ones. And I think the serial numbers will, you know, back up that. So that's C. And then D. D was always interesting. All I wanted for my D bus is I wanted an exciting thing. I wanted to widen things naturally. So if I wanted to throw in, let's say, I wanted my backing vocals to get wider, right? I would then kind of send it to this and A and D, and then the backing vocals would be like, whoa. It was great sound. And you could smack these guys. This meter just said it's working. But you know, normally if you saw a meter going down, you'd probably think that the sound got small, but it didn't. This is only one setting on here. I found it, I never touched it again. It's set to VCA, the slope is at 3, I don't even remember, and the stereo is at 150. It's cranked, it's 211, right? It's Spinal Tap. This is the 211. And then whatever else is going on here, this is the one setting, I've never touched it, and that was great. It was a great sound. Now this is the Focusrite, right? One of the first Focusrites. In fact, the first Focusrite, because Rupert Neve built this one on his bench. This was the alpha baby. And you can tell because it's a mess inside. I mean, you look it up and the caps don't match. You know, there's all different types of stuff. I haven't had anything done and changed, but I can tell you it still sounds great. I mean, I used it, you know, just a week before the pandemic, because this would be my piano sound. So the piano sound would be this and the LA3As, which I have kept because they're modified. So I'm still holding on to those. And those I had Anthony DeMario modified them, so I had 2 different cans in there. I got the LA3A can, and then he stuck an LA2A can in there. And so all I got to do is go, and it's a little toggle switch says fast and slow. So someday that'll be available, but not yet. And then this Sansamp has like 30 or 40 settings, and I have a little manual with it too. And the manual has all my presets, and it tells you what kind of bass sound. Most of these was the bass sound that I really like. I never replaced it. It would just be a send to it, and it would just make, you know, if I needed a more aggressive bass, and I had all these different sounds, or sometimes it would be a vocal sound. I wanted something more distorted. And so there's a good 30, 40 presets in there. They're all written on the little manual that came with it. This is a Neve 31083, which this does not exist in this way. It never has. But I was good friends with Fletcher, and who built me 2 things, and you can see because it's the same color. And I said, Fletcher, I don't have room I want these, but I don't have room for it, right? I have no real estate. I can't have it go this way. What do you say you build me this so it's horizontal. And he goes, Michael, yeah, okay, I can do that. And so he put it in and he said, okay, what color do you like? So he sent me this little can, you know, he sent me different colors. And I said, no. And then I finally went, that's the color. It's just like the beautiful deep blue, which I'm sure, you know, you can't really see unless you see it in person. But it's a beautiful deep blue. And when he sent that to me, the hours that he spent on this thing, he said, I can't even begin to charge you for that. I was like, I'm sure you can't, but let's come up with some kind of an agreement. But he put a lot of heart and soul in that. But these are the originals. They're great. And then while we're here, I said, well, you did great with the Neve. How about, he says, I've got 4 Helios to sell you. I go, really? I go, listen, you know, I still got that real estate problem. I go, you think you could put all 4 horizontal again? He goes, let me work on that. So he worked on it forever. And I believe there's the Jensen transformers, or I believe there's Jensens on the back. But these are the original Helios from a Helios desk. Once again, he laid them on there, and there's the same color. That's the same paint. Same color. Same can. And he built that. There's only one of these around. And I love these because the mid-range is so grainy, and it's a great sound. And so what do we have? I think we've gone through this one. I mean, you know, let's remember that every record I ever made from the time I left Media Sound, that would have been in '84, I think. Every record from then I made has been made through this. So you look at any discography that I have, you're gonna have this sound on it and the Pultecs that are on the back. Because that was my first pair of hardware. And then over the years, of course, then there was everything else. So, I mean, you name it, all the Coldplay records and the Kooks and I mean, it's a long list, but it's all there. Then when I decided to go over here, when I decided to go hybrid, that's when I incorporated, I wanted 4 different sounding desks. I mean, here I am, I had an SSL. I love that sound. Hey, well, if I'm gonna go hybrid, why not have 4 different sounding desks? Why not have a Neve that I grew up on? Why not have, you know, an API kind of desk? Why not have, you know, a warm analog kind of desk, right? So that's when I ended up with the Chandler, which is just a great sound. And that would be all my drums and bass and percussion would go through this. And then out of this into the 2 distressors. And then the Neve, that would be my Neve sound. Somewhere around here is probably on the back. Let me see. Somewhere here. Oh, here we go. So this would be A. So this is my Neve sound, right? My Neve desk sound it came with a Widener. And so this would be A. Everything that I wanted sustaining and stuff, that would be my Neve 33609 going into my Pultec, going into the Neve. That was my Neve desk. And then C was for my guitars. So my Pendulum Audio, I go, oh, what do I need? I need something that's clear and just really open sounding. And so that was the Tone Lux. And so I called Paul, because of course I've known Paul since, you know, for so many years. I said, Paul, I think your Tone Lux is going to be perfect for my guitars. I go, but you know, if you could maybe just do one thing for me. I go, you know, Neve came up with this really cool widening button. I go, do you think maybe you could build me a widening button? And he goes, let me hear what it is going through the Neve for the widening, and I'll see what I can do. So there's only one tone lux that has this, and here you have it right here. This is your widening button right here. Only one of. And so that kind of takes care of my ABC. And then, right, and then of course these, because when I was learning in the second room, I couldn't have the 33609. Chandler's LTD2 sounded just as good. And so that's what I was using. And I kept those just in case my knees would crap out. I had backups for everything. So I didn't really sell. That's why I didn't sell this or that. And I kept that. So now other things. My first distortion that a good friend taught me, Martin Tereffi, he's the one who used to have this in his studio. He goes, Michael, you want to get a great sound for distortion, a nice warm? He goes, here, just get one of these. You know, this was like a hard disk, right? And he said, just put it in the mic in, and it just sounds amazing. And he was absolutely right. So I had the mic and line removed, put it to the back, and that was what on my Brauer Motion plugin, the little window there that's for distortion. That distortion is this. We modeled this Akai. So that's on the Brauer Motion plugin. And that was the first one. So, I mean, there's a lot of history behind that. You name it. I mean, I used it on every record, every day. And while we're here, let's see. Oh, this one is crazy. Okay, I don't know if you can zoom in on this one, but it looks like the normal 2500, right? Except this little thing over here. Of course, again, Paul, being a good friend, I said, Paul, what can you do just to make this 2500 really kick ass? He goes, I said, can you change the gain stage? What can you do? He goes, yeah, you know, let me see what I can do. So if you look this, it says armed. And there's a little decal that looks like it's, you know, it's got a nuclear, right? And you bring that up, and there's a little button here. And when you turn that on, it turns red and lights up, and this glows, and this is the arm, and it changes the character of the 2500. It's just another animal now. Really, really cool, because it's already good, and this just made it a little bit better. DP4, I really hesitated selling this because I have a bunch of presets which are also written in the sheet I've given you on the manual. And it has a lot of special presets for background vocals, and there's this one Doppler sound that I've used. I used to try to fit it in every album at some point that I ever mixed, and it goes doo 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 doo, and so you would hear that, and I have never heard anything else to do that, and I was going to wait until I had it modeled, but here it is. So this is not any ordinary DP4 because it has all my presets in it. So that makes it, you know, a different animal. PCM 70, this particular model, I got this because I always thought, man, Andy Wallace, who needs nothing, he needs one reverb and one compressor as opposed to this, and his records always sound great. And you know, we're talking to him, and he's like, yeah, you know, I just use a PCM 70, and I think it's the locker, or it's whatever. When you turn this on, you'll see the setting. It's bathroom, or it's a real simple sound, and that was his sound generally. This one, again, it's not just any 200. This was a sound that I used on all the Coldplay records, where you just wanted like a kind of an ambience, a short, roomy ambience. It was grainy. It just had that perfect. It didn't have a lot of top end, but it had great character. Great character. and I have a bunch of presets in there. And of course, all the batteries have been replaced so that the memory is still intact and you can turn it on and it hasn't disappeared. This was my Widener for years and years. You know, this is a great, I have two of those, as a matter of fact. Again, because I was trying to mimic my hybrid room with my main room. So that's why if you see two of anything, it's because of that. And this is, you know, that's the setting. That was my Widener. And then this is really interesting. I mean, you know, I haven't used it in a while, but this was the Zoom DSP, what is that? It's Advanced Instrument Effects Processor. And again, I did a lot of bass sounds with this as a send. So there's a whole bunch of presets in here. And I pretty much, any of my presets, I would always say MHB something, MHB something. So it's pretty easy to tell. TC Electronics, this is really, again, on its own, it's just a TC Electronics. But this one had a friend of mine made these about 90 patches of all the different delays. The band, the old bands, the Shadows and bands like that, you know, used a Miazzi and the Vincent, and he made me like 50 or 60 presets, and I have a few in there. Again, you'll see them as MHB. So on its own, it's just a TC Electronics, but when you open it up and turn it on, you're gonna see all my patches in there. Anything else special on this? No, that pretty much covers that one. This one, the Manley, I love this. And, you know, I asked Ivana to please add a different, you know, sidechain link on the bottom so that I think it comes with maybe at 150 or maybe none, I don't remember. But mine were always set at 92. Like well, I'll get to that. But so she put in a 90 and a 150 so that the compression doesn't trigger until, you know, above 90 or above 150. It's a great sounding one. The Clariphonic, I've kind of written it in basically what he was doing. That's a 5K push, that's a 9K push, a 19K push, a 39K, 800. So I just wrote these down, you know, and I've been using that on records. It's such a great sound. And this is my germaniums that I have been using. There's two sets, which is the one I usually, this was the one that I was making on all my records. Oh yeah, because those are EQs. Right, I sold the second pair. So this is the one that had been on my records since it came out, and I believe these are the first two because it's serial 01 and serial 02. So it doesn't get any better than this. And I didn't even use these for the first year. I don't know, I just didn't like the sound of them, and then I just had them at setting. I don't know whether it just needed to age or whatever, but eventually this became my sound that I haven't touched since. I end up using that 90% on my records.
Sorry.
We good? So these are really, these went from just sitting in the rack to the point where I was wondering whether I was going to sell them or not, to the point where one day, what I did with this is, this went across my stereo bus. So I had 4 different sounds, depending on the kind of record I was making, right? I could go with this kind of sound or this where you had optical and a VCA, but it was non-tube, but it had a really great mid-range, to this one that was really a much more modern 670 Fairchild, and plus very modified. And, you know, or the Manley, right? So I had 1, 2, 3, 4 different sounds. And I had my SPL the master bay, I could just jump in between. You can see ADL, Shadow Hill, Variable Manley, and then the germaniums. And so I could just easily hear that, and I could even combine them if I wanted to. So this is a great box. So we move to this one. This is the Shadow Hill, and it's the Michael Brauer edition. And so with this one, when I first got it, I kept asking him to maybe modify it. I think I asked him to modify the release to be faster. I just kept going and going, and he kept modifying. This used to go in half dB steps to 1 dB. I had to modify it so it's quarter dB, which this became the standard of what you buy now. So by the time he gave me, I got this one, this was the final version. And as you know, it's a great sound, and I was very honored that he would write this etch that in. This Obsidian is great. This replaced my SSL compressor. It just has it's a great sound. It's a combination of that, of the SSL, but also the Neve. It's a very rich, punchy sound, great sound. Then we moved to this 670. Of course, I got to know Peter with Shadow, and David with the distressors, and Anthony DeMario for these. And of course, as you would expect, I would say, wow, can you make it do this? Can you make it do that? Can you make it change it? And so he modified this a lot. Also, he brought up the balance and the meter adjustment, because sometimes the meter just, drifts a little bit, so you can easily change that. But, changing the balance is great, so that it just becomes a whole different sound by the way you play with the balance, and then against the threshold and stuff. And then he put my signature on here. So this one, there's only one of these. That's cool. Then we come over here. Focusrite speaks for itself. It's really punchy. These pies, this has been my tom sound since the day I bought them. I bought them years, and that's the one setting I haven't touched them. When the toms come in, you hear that explosive tom sound. That's these. We already know about the distressors. The Motowns. It still says here MRC, Motown Recording Company. So it still has the Motown label on it. These took me years to find. These were just, I think I waited 5 or 6 years to finally find them. And they sound great. They were a bit noisy, so Vincent took out the transformer so that it's quieter, so that it's on the outside of the unit now. So you can really crank these and they just sound great. I mean, there's nothing like them. Drummers are really, really cool. They're stock. This is the Compex. I had these completely refurbished. When they were thinking about making a copy, I said, okay, well, you can use mine, but you need to refurbish it and recal and stuff, which they did. So this is about as brand new, even though it's old, it is about as brand new as you can get. This EMI is really, really special because this is actually Wade made this one before he really had the EMI sign off, and he was using original EMI transformers, I believe, inside. So he only made a few of these before he changed it. This is the Burl. This would have been my D, where everything, everything went through this eventually. Then of course, we got the Reds, which just sound fantastic. I mean, I don't know what else to say about these. Everything that Chandler makes is fantastic. This is, I have two of them. I'm keeping one, but I'm going to sell this one. This is a really, really early serial number. I mean, I think it's like 024 or something, and I think the one I've kept is 014, so not many. The sound on this is just fantastic. It's an EAR. I'm sure for those who are fans, you'll know what I'm talking about. So you know about these, I already talked about these Helioses, the curve bender that was across my stereo. This was my my B bus sound. These are great. I mean, the tone on these, so these are the germanium's approach, and this is the LTD approach. I can't remember honestly, but these would always be across, kick and snare or whatever, or bass. I think I had this going on the bass for a while. This is a great one on the bass. I mean, what can I say? Another pendulum audio. This would be across my vocals, and it depends. Sometimes a vocal was just right, and I just popped it in, and other times it didn't sound right. So it was there, just like I had other compressors. These are really, really cool. These are just the EQs. These are Telefunken EQs, and it's the let me see, W695A, number 1355 and 1271. And these I used all the time on my snare, all the time. Just a great sound. This one is really, really cool. This got modified a bit, and look at this. It opens up, and then you can do more in here. There's more stuff you can do. You can pack your lunch in there. This was, I carefully, because it's got a lot of gain. I used this specifically on the Amy Mann record that I made, Lost in Space. That record, every vocal sound that had that presence, it was like just like in your face. That was the Department of Commerce, the agriculture compressor. That was the sound. Every song on that record was going into that. And then the 176, the retro speaks for itself. There's nothing modified on that. And that kind of covers this side, the front.